Welcome back to the Pistons Jack YouTube channel. On today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the overreactions I'm seeing from the Pistons fan base, as well as the Magic game tomorrow in just a moment. Just seen some crazy overreactions from some Pistons fans, which is to be expected after a big loss like the team had against the Cavs. And I spoke a little bit about my thoughts on that game on yesterday's video, so go check that out if you haven't already. But I wanted to just go through a couple of what I think are overreactions I'm seeing from fans. The first part of the season, a lot of weird things happen. Teams are still trying to figure out their new teammates. They're still trying to navigate injuries. The whole lot of things that go into the first week or two of the NBA season being a little bit weird, and some of those results are kind of meaningless. So the first overreaction I keep seeing is people saying the off-season just had is already a complete and utter failure. And I'm not saying it won't be a failure, but I think to say that after 4 games is kind of crazy. When you look at some of the things, like a lot of people are saying, well, Pistons should have kept Dennis Schroeder, they should have kept Beasley, they should have kept Tim Hardaway Jr. Well, if we look at these decisions, Dennis Schroeder got offered $45 million from the Kings, which the Pistons couldn't match. They were going to give that money to Malik Beasley, and we'll talk about him in a moment, but the Pistons couldn't really match that offer, and there wasn't really a need to because Dennis was brought in to replace Jaden Ivey, who got injured. So the thinking there was, well, there's no point re-signing him, especially for that amount of money if we need that to sign Beasley. And even if you could have figured out a way to keep both, you had Jaden Ivey coming back, who's going to take all the, well, you want to have all those minutes to see what you have with him and for him to get back to his best. So I understand why some fans miss Dennis Schroeder right now, but he was let go because he got a much better offer from another team to start with, and his role was going to be a lot different with Jaden Ivey, who was meant to be healthy right now, but unfortunately isn't. So the next player, obviously Malik Beasley, like that was completely out of everyone's control. The investigation was launched literally the day before free agency, and the Pistons were going to offer him 3 years, I think $45 million. So that deal was meant to be signed, but obviously for reasons beyond anyone's control, Malik couldn't sign that deal, and he isn't a Piston right now. Maybe he will be if this investigation pans out the right way for him, but it kind of goes without saying, like, there was no way he was going to be a Piston after that came out. And then the Tim Hardaway Jr. one, I kind of get. I must admit, I wanted them to keep Tim. I thought he was underrated last season, and I think when I found out the Pistons weren't going to be able to keep Beasley, weren't going to be able to re-sign him because of the investigation, I was all in on keeping Tim. But I thought, especially when I saw he only signed for like a minimum with the Nuggets. Now, maybe he had conversations with the Pistons and it wasn't just a money thing. There was more of a role for him on Denver to be on a championship team. Maybe that's was a factor in him leaving. But I do understand why fans might want him back, because he was the one of those 3 following the Malik news that I wanted them to keep, because I think what he brought last season, I thought he was really good in the playoffs. Like, he was making threes, he got hot at times and hit some crucial shots. So I thought keeping him would have been cool, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's a massive loss, but I can understand if some fans are frustrated with that. The other thing is, when we talk about some of the new guys and them not panning out, well, Karis LeVert's just been injured. Now, some people didn't like that signing at the time, so that's fine. We'll see what happens, but if you didn't like it at the time, I'm not going to change your mind. But I think I can see the vision with Karis. He just hasn't been healthy, and I think what he brings offensively would be helping this team a lot right now. And like, let's just remember they're 2-2, by the way. Like, this last year they started 0-4. Like, we're not talking about a team they just beat the Rockets on the road, who, like, I don't think anyone expected them to win that game. So, but back to my point, like, Karis LeVert just hasn't been healthy. We barely saw him in the preseason. I think we only saw him in one preseason game for like 10 minutes, and we've only seen him for about 15 minutes in that Bulls game. So when he gets back and healthy, he will help this team a lot. And then Duncan Robinson, I was speaking about Duncan a lot, but I think he's just really trying to find a rhythm with within the Pistons offense, but also with the Pistons bigs. Like, I don't think the Pistons had a shooter or a player like him on the roster last team, so he's a lot different of a shooter to Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. in the way he gets his shots and that kind of thing. So I think it's going to take a little bit longer than we expected for him to find a rhythm. But I don't think all hope should be lost with Duncan, because we've seen when Duncan hits shots, this team's looked its best. Like against the Rockets, the Pistons' best game, he was one of their best players, and the Pistons' offense looked good. Start of that Cavs game, he hit 2 threes within that first 6 to 7 minutes, and the Pistons were leading by like 6 to 8 points. Like, I think he's a bit of a barometer for this offense, which maybe is a bit of an issue that they rely on him this much for spacing and to open things up. But I think once he can get more of a rhythm and chemistry with his teammates, he'll be fine as well. And then I think when we look at some of the other signings, if we're talking about the offseason, I think re-signing B-Ball Paul was amazing. Like, I don't even think I need to speak about how good he's been, especially in that Rockets game. And then I think Javonte Green as well has been really solid. Like, I think he's been better than solid. I think he had some really good moments in the Rockets game, even the Bulls game, especially for another guy that's on a minimum. So I think it's kind of crazy to say the off-season's been a failure right now. And then the other thing I wanted to quickly touch on was some people saying to me, well, Jack, good teams don't lose like that. And I said it yesterday, but the Pistons literally a year ago lost the exact same type of game to the Knicks, who were controlled the game from start to finish. I think it was even worse than that game against the Cavs yesterday. And, look how that went. Pistons end up winning the next 3 regular season games and could have won the first round playoff series. And then I just think it's important when we look around the league, the Atlanta Hawks and Orlando Magic, 2 teams that everyone said won the offseason that are going to be above the Pistons, they've both started 1-3. They're going a lot more worse than our team. And they haven't played better opponents. They played each other once and the Magic won. Then both of them have lost to the Bulls in worse fashion than the Pistons. And the Hawks got absolutely killed by Toronto on opening night by like 20 points. So, the Pistons play the Magic tomorrow, and we'll touch on that game. But I think it's just important to remember, like, when teams bring in new players or they lose key players, like, it's an adjustment. And teams that lose a few games in October and early November can look completely different come April. And we saw that with our own team last year. And another one I just want to throw in there was the Clippers got beaten by the Jazz by like 25 points on opening night as well, just for another one. Like, these weird results happen in the first week as teams are trying to feel each other out and navigate injuries and everything we've kind of touched on. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you've seen any other overreactions, maybe you completely disagree with me, that's fine. I respect everyone's opinion, but I just think it's way too early. Like, if this team is having those sorts of losses end of December, early January, or definitely later, then yes, that's a little bit concerning. But I think this early in the season, everything's so fine, and that you shouldn't be worrying about the team's long-term view right now. Like, I think 20 games is a perfect sample size where you can actually make some real judgments. But I wanted to touch on the Pistons game against the Magic tomorrow, or today by the time you're watching this. Both teams' 5th game of the season. The Magic, as I mentioned, come in 1-3. They've lost 3 in a row. The Pistons are 2-2. Historically, the Pistons have struggled against the Magic when they're healthy, at least in the past 3 years since they've had Paolo and Franz and been a much better team. Typically, the Magic's size and just like the Pistons haven't had the defenders to go with, like Franz, Paolo, and even some of their bigger centers. But last year, I think the Pistons did get a win, but I think the Magic were pretty injured in that game. So I think this should be a good game, though. I expect it to be close, even though the Magic are struggling. Both teams are in the bottom 5 offensively, both in the bottom 6 for 3-point shooting. So both teams are really struggling offensively right now. And I think the Magic are being a lot worse than the Pistons defensively. But like I said, the sample size is still very small. Regardless of how each team's going right now, I think this will be a really close game. I do expect the Pistons to win. I always thought the Pistons would be 2-2 at this moment. And I thought this game would be like a true game to really see, like a measuring stick game, because like I said, the Magic have typically handled the Pistons well, but both teams are kind of young and at a similar point in their development. But the Magic obviously did bring in Desmond Bane who's meant to kind of take them to another level above the Pistons this season, but he's struggling to shoot. So he is a player when he was on the Grizzlies who has scored heavily against Detroit. I think he had a career high, not last season, the one before against Detroit. So that's one thing to watch. I think this should be a really good game. The Pistons could be without Asar. He's questionable with an illness. Nothing to worry about there, but he could be out. And then Marcus Sasser and Karis LeVert are both questionable. So they've been doubtful or out the first 3 games, so that's a positive as well. I think the lack of ball handling is a big reason for why Cade's struggling the way he is. So I think even if you can just get back one of Sasser or LeVert, that will help a lot. I expect them probably to be a little bit rusty, but I think it'll help no matter what. And if Asar is out, this brings me to the last thing I want to talk about with the starting 5. So that's the one thing I probably am concerned a little bit about. The starting 5 has struggled. It's like probably the worst starting 5 in the league right now. Very small sample, but when you look at numbers, they are down the bottom. And it's a big reason for it's the main reason for their slow starts. JB did hint at looking into the starting 5 in his post-game press conference. I don't expect him to make any changes. But if Asar is out, I would love to see Ron thrown in, because Ron, with that starting group, has like a neutral positive minus net rating. And then the lineup that's been really good is Ron, Cade, Duncan Robinson, Stu, and Jalen Duren, which has been a plus 38. These are all small samples, but I think Ron's been one of the biggest impact players for the Pistons. And I think his energy, along with Stu to the same extent, them checking into the game has been huge for Detroit after these slow starts, and has often ignited them to get back into the game and potentially take the lead. So I think Ron is a candidate that would start definitely for Asar. But if Asar's playing, I don't think JB will make any changes, because I don't think you can take Duncan out right now and put in another, in theory, non-shooter in Ron. And I just can't see him benching Tobias this early in the season. But I would like to see if early on they don't have it going, I would like to see him just throw Ron out there and take Duncan off within the first 3 minutes and just see what happens and mix it up. Because Ron, Cade, and Asar, that trio might be the best trio the Pistons have right now. So I think if you can get those 3 out there, maybe get Stu in a bit earlier to add some more shooting there with Tobias, I think that could be a 5 you run with early in the first if they're getting off to a slow start. I don't want to see them checking in at the 4-minute mark of the first if the team's off to a slow start. Just be a bit quicker to make that adjustment. But that's my thoughts. No crazy overreactions from me. Really excited for this Magic game. I think the Pistons should win. I think they're at a point now where they can handle the Magic better than that in previous seasons. And I think it's going to be a really fun game. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're going to the game and any responses to my overreactions. But thank you so much for watching. And as always, go Pistons.